We'll take more of your calls. John, we're going to talk to you about those rising bills, the energy crisis in just a moment. But let's get into the world of policing and welcome to the conversation Crime and Policing Minister and Conservative MP Kit Malthouse, who joins me now, who's going to be talking about money to be made available for tackling violent crime. But before we get to that, Minister, can I put you a story from today's Sun newspaper? Labour is ahead of the Conservatives on law and order among wobbling voters, a Conservative poll has found. If you can't deliver on law and order at the Conservatives, what can you deliver on? Good morning.
Morning, Governor. Well, look, I've learned over the last decade or so that the fight against crime, and particularly the fight against violence, is never an easy one. It's always two steps forward, one step back. But we are putting our shoulders to the wheel, as I hope you will see, and we can talk about in a minute.
We will.
To try and drive those.
I promise you we will. But let's just address this. Who would you vote for in a general election now? The issues concerning voters, 37% Labour, 31% the Conservatives when it comes to law and order. 12 years in power, not you personally. Your party's failed. Why?
Well, I don't believe we have failed, Nick.
Well, why are these voters saying this then, Kit?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. To be perfectly honest with you, Nick, I don't care so much about polling numbers. I care about crime numbers. And my job is to try and drive them down. We're succeeding in some parts of crime. There's still more work to do in other areas of crime. But I hope that over the longer term, people will come to realise that, as they did when Boris was mayor in London and I was deputy mayor, that we're on the right track and they'll be safer as a result of our work.
But you do accept that in some areas crime is rising. It is not even being checked. It is increasing in certain categories, Minister.
Well, as I said earlier, Nick, the fight against crime is always two steps forward, one step back. And in some areas, it is true to say, for example, homicide, where we've seen a rise over the last few months, unfortunately, that there is more work to do. Now, on that particular offence, I've pulled the red handle with UK policing. We are mobilising to get ahead of the prevention agenda so we can drive those numbers down, having meetings on an almost daily basis with senior police officers to focus ourselves on that number. But that sits alongside things like under 25 admissions to hospital with a knife injury, which are down now about 18-19%, which is great news. Burglary, robbery, car crime, neighbourhood crime now down quite significantly, as well assisted, I have to confess, by the pandemic, but nevertheless giving us an opportunity to drive them down further. This is not an easy fight. It's one of the hardest fights any government can face, but we are throwing everything we've got at it, and I hope over time we can win and convince people that we've got the right strategy.
As part of that strategy, Minister, talk to us about hot spot policing and VRUs, violence reduction units. What are they, sir?
So we basically think we need a twin-track approach on violence, alongside the very large uplift in police officers, which I know we've talked about in the past, which is going well. We do need to think about what we do with them and how we focus them. Now, violence in particular is often very geographically focused. You will know areas around where you live where violence happens again and again. So through our GRIP program, we're putting money into a kind of modern data-driven approach to an old-fashioned idea of hotspot policing, that you should analyse in each force area where the violence is occurring, and then make sure police officers are there at the right time, or even often just on a random basis, to create the sense of presence to deter violence. And where we've done this, for example, in Southend, we've seen very sharp falls in violence. Alongside that smart, tough policing approach, though, we do need the long-term work. And so we're putting more money into violence reduction units, which are units in each of the 20 most affected by violence areas across England and Wales, which draw together the public sector to identify those young people in particular on the fringe of crime and violence, and then intervene with them early, moving them away from that life and onto a path of light and righteousness. And that twin track approach, we know from the past, has worked, and we hope it'll work again.
How do we know it will be money well spent? When I next speak with you, 6 months, 12 months, whatever, what can I hold you to? What will we see?
Well, we're going to do a very extensive evaluation, Nick, but I doubt you're going to read that. What I hope you will see is fewer young people in hospital with knife injuries, fewer murders and killings, fewer kids involved in county lines, and generally safer neighbourhoods. I mean, my part of the Home Office business is what you would call kind of kinetic real world crime, neighbourhood crime, robbery, burglary, car crime, violence, county lines, and murder. And I want all those indicators down very significantly. We're winning on some, not on all, lots of work to do. And that really is what counts. So that when you leave your front door, Nick, you feel safer and you know you're safer.
As a senior member of the government, there's a couple of other areas I must get you on. There are allegations that you and perhaps more Mr Sunak and others have a bit of a tin ear to the outcry concerning the cost of living crisis. Energy bills going up by £700. The websites were in meltdown, people trying to get their readings across, and other rising costs. Come on, Mr Sunak's got to get the chequebook out again, doesn't he? Kit, good one, wouldn't you say?
Well, I don't think we have a tin ear. We recognise that it's really, really tough out there. I mean, I'm sitting here with my smart meter thing telling me how much I'm spending an hour in my home. It is really tough. We recognise that. And in fact, I tried to log on to my power company app last night. It wasn't working either. So, and remember that the Chancellor, just like every MP, is rooted in the experience of his constituents. He's sitting down in his surgery, as I will be later today, talking to the constituents about their problems and how they live and the problems that they face. So he's absolutely on this. We've moved some way to assist, as you know, lots of money now, hopefully flowing into the system through the council tax rebates, national living wage rising. But we can't, as the Chancellor said, I'm afraid, ameliorate all of the damage that these fuel price rises are going to cause. He is monitoring it on a daily basis. If he needs to move further in the future, if the economy allows us to do that, don't forget we're carrying huge debts at the moment, then I know he'll look very seriously at doing so.
You mentioned the meters. What other economies or what else are you cutting back on in the Malthouse household, Minister?
Well, obviously, the day-to-day is quite tricky. As you know, Nick, I've got children.
Yes, I do.
And they need to be fed, and that cost is rising. My fuel prices are rising quite significantly, and I have to say I'm on, in my constituency, on oil still, sadly, central heating. And
you heat your house with oil? That must be exorbitant, Minister.
Well, of course, oil, I'm afraid to tell you, doesn't come under the energy price cap either. And lots of people in rural areas are suffering from the oil price rise. So we are feeling it very significantly. I have to confess to you, we did convert last year to electric vehicles.
Right.
So we're feeling the electric price, but not through the petrol. So it's a challenge for everybody.
Well, no wonder you've got a log fire blazing behind you. It's probably the best that you do. It's to keep the house nice and warm. I wonder if I can refer you... Sorry, go on.
Trying hard to, Nick. I have to confess to you, I come from a background where the heating was religiously turned off on the 1st of April. Unfortunately, today is very cold, so I have lit a fire to keep us warm.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Well, I'm sure the children welcome it. Need to have a couple of other conversations with you. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said this yesterday.
If Carrie Johnson gets a fixed penalty notice, of course it should be made public. My focus is on the Prime Minister because he's the one who sets the culture.
Were it Nick Ferrari of Station Approach Blackheath who was done for having some friends around for a Prosecco party, everyone would know about it. Shouldn't it be the same for all within number 10? You are policing minister.
Well, that's not right, Nick. The routine approach of the police is not to reveal the identity of those who get fixed penalty notices. And, I don't see why that should be changed for people who work at Downing Street. Don't forget, a fixed penalty notice is actually just a reasonable belief by the police that the law has been broken. You still have the right to challenge it. But from a personal point of view, as a politician, I think I'm in a different situation. I have to tell you, if I got a fixed penalty notice, I would tell you.
Would the Prime Minister?
You'd have to ask him, but...
You know him well. You were his deputy mayor in London. You've known him for 2 decades. Would he tell us?
I think it's a hypothetical question, Nick, but I think if he did, he probably would, yes.
And his wife?
You'd have to ask her. I can't speak for non-competence, if you like, Nick. I mean, obviously, as I say, a fixed penalty notice is a reasonable belief by the police that an offence has been committed. Individuals have the right to challenge that. Let's see where this lands in the future.
Lastly, coming back very much to your role as policing minister, you won't probably have had sight of this. And I have to admit, when I read it in one newspaper, I thought it was an April Fool. It's not. It's in 2 different newspapers. And indeed, the DCI at the Met, Mick Neville, a man I'm sure you know and I know and I've spoken with, is even quoted on the story. This is the problem police horses are having with the rainbow flag road crossings. The horses interpret them as obstacles and almost they try to jump over them. Money is now having to be spent to provide training for the horses and indeed for their riders. This is a load of woke nonsense, isn't it, Minister?
Well, Nick, it would be easy to think that, but obviously we are seeing a growth in painting on the highway, whether that is cycle painting highways or different messages being put on the highways. The one thing I do know as a daughter who goes riding is that horses are unpredictable animals at times, and getting them used to everything they're going to face in the public realm, whether it's a rainbow street marking or a sign on the road about blue lane where the bikes are going, seems to me a good idea.
But we're having to train. They're a waste of money, surely, if we're having to train horses to get over these particular rainbow crossings. No?
Well, I don't know. I mean, councils paint rainbows on the street. I understand. I haven't seen one myself, but apparently it is a thing. But as I say, I do see, certainly when I'm around London, lots and lots of blue stripes painted for bicycles on the highway. Right. And so anything painted, you need to get the horse used to. And so it seems to me that it's a sensible thing by the Met in the face of what seems to be happening out there. Those councils paint more and more slogans and flags and things on the street.
All right. Get the porridge on for the children. Keep them warm today. It's cold down there. Thank you. Policing Minister Kit Malthouse appearing here on LBC. 8 o'clock news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the biggest jump in domestic energy bills